Popularly touted as the Hunting Tiger the Jagdtiger, is a leading heavy tank destruction unit created and manufactured in Germany. It was popularly used during the Second World War, and some of its primary materials included the Tiger II chassis. The tank destroyer had an impressive weight of 71 tons, and it was deemed one of the most powerful combat vehicles throughout the Second World War. The biggest highlight of the vehicle was the 128mm Pak 44L/55 primary gun that could easily outpace and destroy every possible tank in the vicinity. This is one of the biggest reasons why the tank served as a primary issue for the Allied troops. Jagdtiger was briefly in service from the last few months of 1944 until the conclusion of the war. The war here indicates the entire World War that at the time had affected the Eastern Front as well as the Western Front. Initially, the Germans ordered 150 units of this tank destroyer. However, due to lack of raw materials, manufacturing delays, and other setbacks, the inventors could come up with only 80 units of the product. As we already know, the weight of the device was excessive, and the drivetrain system wasn't the best either. Even though the Jagdtiger was extremely powerful, it was constantly crippled by a range of mechanical issues. To add to that, mobility issues kept expanding only to make things worse. Currently, Jagdtiger is up for display in 3 museums across the globe. In this video, we will learn more about this tank destroyer and its role during the Second World War. As always, if you want more videos as this one, help this channel with your likes and comments. Inception. Probably the first talks of a tank destroyer came up when the German army requested a 12.8 meters gun that was naturally mounted on a chassis with a self-supporting function. They wanted this weapon to operate as a gun for heavy assaults and were confident that it would help them outperform in the infantry when it came to any target who was powered with armors. Additionally, such a well-developed chassis would also successfully destroy targets without arms. Hitler consented to the proposal, and by 1942, he sent an order for a tank destroyer with the specifications requested by the soldiers. This was also the time when the idea of Jagdpanzer first came to place. As per the letter, the manufacturers worked to mount a 12.8 cm Sturm-Kanon assault gun, which was further customized according to later specifications. Later, the Armory Department received additional requirements to modify the engine so that it could seamlessly move across, exerting pressure on the chassis. During that time, the Henschel Sohn of Kassel firm worked on this project. This gun would have the same body as a fighting gun, with the only difference being in the chassis and the size. Hitler also asked to remove the muzzle brake because it then made way for the troops to use heavier shells for faster and more debilitating ventures. The shells exhibited exceptional velocity, and the core was sub-caliber, crafted from an 8.8 cm PZ GR.40. The average speed of the unit was 1,260 meters per second, and it was expected to quickly pass through dense armor, up to 245 mm, from a solid distance of almost 1,000 meters apart. This would further allow the Germans to carry out discreet attacks on the Allied troops. Unfortunately, the shell wasn't available for service and couldn't be configured with the pre-existing Jagdtiger. That meant, the Germans had to do away with the muzzle brake, as it would then affect the sabot as it moved from its core and the main barrel. However, since the brake was no longer used, the gun required excessive recoiling energy, especially when it was mounted. A year later, in 1943, more design changes were suggested by the Henschel Sohn company. First, they wanted to increase the length of the vehicle by 30 cms. Next, they wanted to reduce the width of the side armor by 20 mm from its original 10 mm because the thicker part of the armor would naturally weigh in on the chassis. This was also because the width of the current design had touched and crossed the available threshold for rail vehicles. The company also suggested adding a rear-mounted engine because if the engine had a front mount, it would involve a full revamp of the existing chassis as well as some parts of the engine and the cooling unit. Unfortunately, this wouldn't benefit the vehicle and would only increase its cons. A couple of months later, the company suggested adding a new rangefinder with stereoscopic capacities. During that time, they also suggested adding a system for 2-door entry within the fighting unit, which was featured at the end of the giant vehicle. They also asked to add a new machine gun that would be structured in ball mount and placed on a glassy plate. Over the next couple of months, the vehicle witnessed large modifications, with the superstructure being increased to a whopping 250 mm. This was further backed by a wooden prototype of the machine that Hitler personally examined during the last few months of 1943. At this point, he suggested mounting a 128mm length/70 variant instead of the L/55 counterpart because the latter gun would be affected by gravity and the shoulder would need to bear excessive weight without any tangible benefits. This was one of the main reasons the idea wasn't implemented. Finally, in 1944, Ferdinand Porsche recommended a chassis design that met Hitler's requirements but was different from the T3 counterpart. This design featured 4 designated sections that had 2 large 700mm wheels on every side. Soldiers could easily remove these wheels at the time of damage or in case they needed to maintain it. He considered this a better alternative than the design with 800mm wheels as suggested by Henschel. To top everything off, this new design from Porsche was around 1.2 light and it needed working hours less than 450. What's more, it came with a spacious fighting unit, ample space for clearing the ground, and was also affordable. Hitler was finally impressed with Porsche's design and accordingly 11 Jagdtiger were immediately created along with an additional prototype in soft steel. To end this video, remember, if you want more videos as this one, help this channel with your likes and comments.